Welcome back, Pushers. Today's lesson is going to be on American imperialism and when the start of the 1900s happened. We're going to start looking at how we began to expand not only here in the United States, but also overseas. So let's get right to the lesson today. The question that is going to be posed to you for today's lesson is, evaluate the relative importance of different causes for expanding the role of the United States in the world from 1865 to 1910. So why did the United States, what reasons did the United States have to start expanding around the world? This is your DBQ analysis for homework for this Sunday. So doing this lesson will extremely help you, out in figuring out this. Also, as mentioned, Heimer History is also doing this DBQ. He is on his videos. He had wrote 3 different DBQs. He wrote what scores a 2, what scores a 6, and what scores a 10. Go through and read his stuff to see how to really do document analysis and how to really write good essays. That's what you have to be doing on this AP exam. So let's get started with American imperialism. So why did we start getting involved in international politics? Why did we start conquering lands in the late 1800s? Well, there's a number of reasons, okay? So one major reason is foreign investment. The Gilded Age in the late 1800s, after the Civil War, saw a rise of big business, saw electricity, saw food processing, saw cars, saw so much products being built here in the United States that we decided that these business owners said, wait, we can go to international markets. We can go to China. We can go to Japan. We can go to Europe, and we can sell stuff. So right after the Civil War, we sold about $100 million overseas. By 1900, $2.5 billion. So we had a huge amount of investment overseas. We had investments in properties in Cuba, investments in the Caribbean, investments in North America, investments in Central America. You name it, our business owners took the products and moved it all over the world. So we began to trade, and American products began to trade. And you're going to see in the graph here on the left that our exports start to really increase and go past imports. And when you are exporting more products than you are importing, you are profitable. If you look today, unfortunately, in the United States, it's just the opposite. We don't export a lot of products. We import more stuff, which means that money is leaving the country. Every dollar that you give to another country's products made there is $1 less made in America. So if you stay in American, buy American, you do much better. And then if you can sell your American products overseas in other countries like Europe, in Asia, then you can profit big time. Another reason why we began to start expanding. Alfred Mann wrote his very famous book, History of Sea Power, from 1660 to 1783. And what that book is going to do is, that book is going to show how important a navy is in building the United States up. And so what we're going to do is, if we're going to start building a navy, and you look at how important the British Navy was, you look at how important the Spanish Armada was, those navies conquered the world. And so it was our time in the late 1800s, right after the Civil War. We got through our problems. We got through our issues. Let's start it going overseas. One of the best defenses that the United States has is the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. Those oceans protect us from so many wars. But if we need to get around the world, we need to get to Europe, we need to get to Asia, we need to have a navy. One of the problems early on in our country, not having a navy, was impressment. If we can't defend our products going across the seas from pirates or from capturing of other countries, then we're running into problems. If you have a strong navy, nobody captures you. We're a lot stronger, we're a lot better that way. And so having a navy is going to be important. And so his book was a major turning point in our country, and we began to start expanding. He looks upon the history of Britain, and people say, wait, it's our turn now. Let's us do it. And so you look at the different empires. Look how big all the red is what the Spanish had. All the red there is all the stuff that Britain once had. You don't get to be a small little tiny island in northern Europe and conquer all this without a navy. You have to have a navy. And so that's the influence right there. Another theory was social Darwinism. There was a poem that came out called White Man's Burden, that the United States was here to help other people, and other races were not as important as the white man. They were lesser people, uncivilized. And this goes all the way back from Columbus, goes back from the early British. many saw the Indians as uncivilized. And so as we as Americans start to go around the world, as Americans start to travel around the world, they start to see other people, yellow and brown, saying that they're not as important. And so it's a social Darwinist theory that we are stronger, we are the best race, the hierarchy of the race, and that's going to dominate that time. A lot of people thought this should be what America should look like. Sort of believe it, but that's okay. Another reason why we begin to go is missionaries. In China, there's a number of missionaries that are there until the Boxer Rebellion happens. In Hawaii, leprosy was going there, so we put nuns over there for leprosy colonies. So much like the early sailors and explorers, is God, gold, and glory. This is the God, the gold is the economic, and the glory is America taking over the world. Another reason why we went around the world is the frontier was closed. In 1890, the census came out and said the frontier was closed. And it was Frederick Jackson Turner's thesis, the Turner thesis, that really showed the frontier is our escape valve. If you were living in the cities and you were tired of the work there, you just go into the West and you can settle and restart your life over again. But when you close the frontier, well, Manifest Destiny is done. Possibly. Let's take it around the world. And so we begin to start to acquire new territories. 1865 is shown in this DBQ because it's Seward's Folly Icebox, the purchase of Alaska. As much as we went around the world, there was also people that said we should not go around the world. The Anti-Imperialist League, Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, and others thought that we were being too bullish, and our ideas of American independence and freedom were not being used when we go through these other nations. Hawaii, we basically bullied. Hawaii was a trading post. And so in order to conquer Hawaii, one of the things that we did was we decided to put a massive tariff on all Hawaiian goods. Then when Hawaii says, then when we can conquer Hawaii, we can take those tariffs off. And it was actually allocated by a guy named Dole, who you see here. His cousin was the pineapple farmer from there. So there was definitely some backroom deals that were going on about how we got Hawaii. At first, they didn't want us to have Hawaii, but by the late 1800s, we annexed Hawaii because of the Spanish-American War. And so in 1898, during the height of the Spanish-American War, because we were fighting in the Philippines, we saw a need for Hawaii, so we annexed Hawaii and made it a territory. It becomes the 50th state in the 1950s after World War II. Alaska, the 49th state, is going to be purchased for $7.2 million. One of the reasons we purchased this is to get Russia out of America. Russia was starting to creep down the coastline of Alaska, coastline of the Pacific Ocean, and we were fearful of Russian intervention. So to get the Russians out, we bought a big piece of ice for $7 million. A lot of people thought we were played, but later on see that we have oil in there and natural gas and even gold in Alaska. So we made out in the long run. And so here you start to see all these different islands that we start to pick up in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. American Samoas, from the Solomon Islands, the Marshall Islands, Hawaii, and many, many more as we start to go through. And really, the world kind of became a grab bag for Europeans. And Europeans were trying to go around and take as much as the world. And so we thought, you know what, if France is doing it and Britain's doing it and Germany's doing it, we need to do it as well too. And so in Cuba, you look at some of the cartoons that are here. In Cuba, they were fighting for their independence against the Spanish. The Spanish were being oppressive. So we decided to send down a boat just to check out what's going on. And the boat explodes. It later finds out that it wasn't the Spanish that exploded the boat. Oops, it was actually a malfunction. But, oh, well, we went to war. And so yellow journalism helped stir up the pot. And McKinley did not want this war originally, but in the end, he is going to get the war because of pressure from other people. And so here's McKinley, the imperialistic tailor. We're adding more and more to our country, and we are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Again, some of the other cartoons into it. Pulitzer and Hearst are going to be the ones that stir up the war. You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war. And so they convinced the American people that war was necessary. They used yellow journalism and jingoism, taking over other territories to be it. There's also the Delome letter. Secretary to Spain basically said he was criticized McKinley, said he was a would-be politician. So McKinley, who didn't want war, was forced into this war through all different areas. You also have Teddy Roosevelt, who basically ordered some of the attacks, even though he didn't get McKinley's approval at the time. And he said, McKinley has a backbone of a chocolate eclair. McKinley later takes him to be his vice president. And then when McKinley dies, Teddy Roosevelt becomes president. Teddy Roosevelt resigns his post, goes down to be fight in Cuba. There you see him as the Rough Rider. And the big quote was, "Remember the Maine, hell with Spain." And so we saw the Spanish as brutes, and we go and we fight this war. And ultimately, we do win the war. When the war's over, we're going to gain territories such as the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Guantanamo Bay. We're going to allow the Cubans to independently own themselves. We get Guantanamo Bay, and we sign what's called the Platt Amendment, which they are not allowed. We are allowed to intervene anytime we want. They are not allowed to have contracts with other countries that may impair their independence. And we also get to build a Navy base, which we still have there in Guantanamo Bay. Cuba has since violated the Platt Amendment, and that's why there are trade restrictions on Cuba today. That goes all the way back from the 1950s with the Cuban Missile Crisis, as well as the Bay of Pigs invasion. In 1898, the last Treaty of Paris is signed. Cuba is freed. We get Puerto Rico and Spain and Guam. We do pay for the Philippines because the fear was the Philippines should be an independent country, but we wanted their territory. And so what ends up happening is we did not want them to go back to the Spanish rule, because why did we fight there only to give them back to the Spanish? So we paid Spain for the Philippines. We had every intention of keeping the Philippines as long as possible, but eventually we do give them their independence. The Philippines become very critical because of its capture of Manila, but Philippines is right there in Asia, and it's a jumping off point. And so we really did not want to give the Philippines their independence, which is ironic. We fight in Cuba, we give Cuba its independence, but when it comes to the Philippines, we don't want to give them the same independence as well too. And so Emilio Aguinaldo, he's the leader of the Filipino uprising. He's part Chinese. He starts to fight back, but unfortunately he's not successful. We promised the Philippines in the 30s we're going to give them their independence, but then World War II breaks out. So right after World War II, July 4th, the same day as us, 1946, we gave the Philippines their independence. And if you look at the Philippines and compare it to most of the other Asian countries in that territory, they're actually financially, politically pretty strong. And some of that has some reasoning to say that the United States had something to do with it. Taft becomes the first governor, and then you're going to know later on to become president of the United States. And so the country is just growing and growing and growing. And eventually we do. We get very, very big, from a little baby all the way to a big old fat guy like most Americans are today. In 1901, McKinley is assassinated, and his vice president, Teddy Roosevelt, comes in. Roosevelt is going to be very strict on foreign policy. He is going to believe in foreign policy, and what he believes is the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. If any European country tries to colonize in the Americas, they have to face the Americans. And so what ends up happening is we begin to carve out the Caribbean Sea. And so it's called his big stick policy. It's his foreign policy where if somebody is violating this, we have the right to go in, and we do. We go into Nicaragua, we go into Cuba, we go into the Dominican Republic, we go into Panama. So we do get involved in a lot of these territories because we believe it's our interest to do so. And so here you see the Roosevelt corollary. We do become pretty much what Roosevelt says is an international police power, that we are going to become a police power. You're going to see this document in the DBQ. And so here we are as an international police power. Remember, he was a police commissioner in New York City in his early 30s. And so our sphere of influence we cover all of North and South America. And you see the Monroe Doctrine through different political cartoons as well, too. In Panama, we wanted a canal. So we originally looked at Nicaragua, but they were not negotiating. So Panama was a little thinner. We go to Colombia. We ask Colombia, can we have Panama? Colombia says no. So all of a sudden, Panama has a new uprising, and they win. And look at that. They win, and they sign a number of treaties, including the Hay-Bonifante Treaty, which guarantees us the canal, and the Hay-Bonavara Treaty, which gives us the canal for 100 years. And so we do dig up the canal. And that becomes American military zone. Panama gets its independence. We get the canal. And there's Teddy Roosevelt operating the canal construction as well, too. Good photo op. And so we dug the Panama Canal because we wanted it. We needed to get products from San Francisco to New York in a quicker time period, and the canal allows us to do that. But Americans weren't always viewed as the right way, right? They were the oppressors. Everybody else was oppressive. But was American oppressive? Absolutely. Later on, questions carry whether the flag carries. In Puerto Rico, the flag carries through the insert cases, but the Constitution does not carry. So you may get citizenship in Puerto Rico, you may get citizenship in Guam and the American Samoas, but you do not get any territory is not allowed to have the Constitution. So rights like cruel and unusual punishment in Guantanamo Bay is allowed because the Constitution does not carry to those territories. Unless you're a state, the Constitution does not follow you. When you become a state, you have to sign the Constitution. The South realized that when they joined back in, they had to re-sign the Constitution, and one of those amendments that was in the Constitution was to end slavery. So one of the things about the Constitution is it's only for states, not for territories. And a lot of people think it should be carried to territories, but they're territories, they're not states, so they don't have the same rights. In China, we're going to have the open door policy. You've talked about the negativities with the Chinese Exclusion Act before, but we are going to open up the door. It's called open door policy, and the reason why it's called open door policy is we were the last ones to show up. So we wanted to have a sphere of influence in China, and so the Germans were already there, the French were already there, the British were already there. We were the last ones to show up, but we said, hey, we want to be there as well too. And so here you see the sphere of influence. Russia was there in the north, Japan was even in there, Germany, Britain, and France. And so we wanted to get involved as well too. So everyone is allowed to trade with China. This is right after the Boxer Rebellion. So China is a little bit weak, but they are seeing opportunities for economics. And especially look at today with the 1.7 billion people that are living in China. Although some people think maybe we shouldn't have traded with the whole flu going on, but that's a different story. So the open door policy allows for everyone to come in. Taft is going to change from big stick diplomacy to dollar diplomacy. He's only going to get involved in areas where it's economically viable. So he does get involved in U.S., in the Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And later on, what we're going to have is Japan. Japan is going to originally be isolated. They're going to open up to trade. It's called the Gentleman's Agreement that the Japanese are not allowed to enter the country in 1908. And we become a major Pacific power. Teddy Roosevelt gets a Nobel Peace Prize in 1905 for signing the Treaty of Portsmouth, which ended a war between Russia and Japan. For Mexico, Wilson's moral diplomacy says we should only go to spread democracy and promote peace. He is not against going and taking territories. He's only there to help people if they need it. And so they go with Pancho Villa and they search for the bandits in Mexico, but our investments go through. There's fighting in Mexico. There's fighting in Honduras. There's fighting in Costa Rica, in Nicaragua, in Panama, and Dominican, and Haiti, and Cuba. And all this leads into the big question of should we or should we not? So the big question is what was the reasons why we started to expand into the world powers? So you want to talk about all those different areas. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And so please make sure this DBQ is done this weekend. This document analysis is done. Please check out the videos by Heimer History because they will really show all the things that you need to do for the AP exam. He does a wonderful job. So take the 20 minutes that he does, go through his stuff, look on his website. I can't recommend him more than that. So please take the time and go through this weekend and learn about imperialism, although it's probably not going to be the topic on the test. Learning about it, seeing it, practicing it is going to help you with all the other ones. I hope everyone's having a wonderful weekend. Make sure your homework is in by 10 o'clock on Sunday, and we will be meeting again next Tuesday. Any questions? Let me know. Talk to you later. Peace.